Good morning to all of you. Today I'll be taking a talk on cell degeneration, cellular alterations, and intracellular accumulations. This is the disclaimer that this is a teaching based on personal knowledge for undergraduates, and all the picture credits are mentioned below the images, and images from internet are credited to the source site. Before we go into the details, let me at the outset talk a little bit about the terminology which is there in this subcellular alterations. Hypertrophy means an increase in cell size. That means if the cell is X, anything more than X is hypertrophy. And hypertrophy of cell means that there are more organelles in it than before. Hypertrophy of tissue and organ is also possible. So you can talk about, say, hypertrophy of heart or hypertrophy of muscle, which are organs and tissues, but it is only called so when the organ becomes bigger because the individual cells which compose the organ become bigger. On the other hand, hyperplasia means an increase in number of cells. So this obviously cannot be pertaining to a cell. It is only applicable to tissues and organs. So a tissue might be hypoplastic or an organ might increase in size because of hyperplasia. Atrophy, on the other hand, means a decrease in cell size by loss of organelles, or it could mean a decrease in tissue or organ size. So we don't have a separate word which is the opposite of hypertrophy and hypoplasia. Atrophy stands in for both of these. So there is a decrease in tissue or organ size. This could be due to both decreased cell size, that is shrinkage of the cell, or decrease in number of cells by apoptosis, as we discussed in the previous lecture. So coming to subcellular adaptations, whatever is considered physiological limits, within that this is homeostasis. But if we have non-lethal injury, that is injury which is not enough to kill the cell, you can get an adaptation. If it is within physiological limits, it's considered normal. But a number of times the limits are considered as pathological adaptation. That includes terms like hypertrophy and atrophy, which I'll be coming to, but other things like metaplasia, etc., which are covered in this chapter. We have alterations in structure and function of organelles in pathological adaptation. So the function can also change. The effect of these adaptations is to diminish the effect of the injury. It produces morphological changes on gross and microscopy. That's why it is taught to in pathology. What are the changes which you can see on a gross or a microscopic level? And another way to look at it is that these are the responses of tissues and organs to chronic injury. So the first of these alterations, which is simplest, is alterations of smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So you know already, and we discussed this earlier in injury also, that P450 mixed function oxidases are present in liver, and this is an enzyme in the endoplasmic reticulum whose function is to oxidize chemicals to make them more soluble. So the purpose is detoxification. So although oxidization makes substances more soluble, the majority of them are rendered less toxic, but in some of them the oxidation product can be more toxic than before also, in which case there is more injury or more poisoning because of the function of this. Big example of this we have already discussed is CCl4, which forms a free radical which injures the liver, or paracetamol, which has a metabolite which depletes glutathione, because that's also a free radical. So anything getting oxidized can become a free radical and cause injury. Some things like barbiturates. Barbiturates are a group of drugs which you'll be studying in pharmacology. So phenobarbital is the typical example. Similar to phenobarbital, a large number of other drugs also they can cause something called an induction. Induction means they induce an increase in the amount of smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and this results in hypertrophy of the cell. So the purpose of it is increased function. If you give phenobarbital, there is increase in the metabolism of the all the barbiturates because of this increase in smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So the mixed function oxidase is also increased in amount, and then other substances which are also metabolized by the same system also get affected. So a substance which may itself not be an inducer of smooth endoplasmic reticulum might, however, reduce its plasma half-life because of detoxification, and therefore the drug dose has to be adjusted in that. Now, usually this is a pharmacological problem and the liver itself is not enlarged. The sinusoidal flow remains more or less the same. But if you do an electron microscopy, what you find is that if you have smooth endoplasmic reticulum induction by the phenobarbital, you have increased amounts of smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which are these vesicles. Unlike the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which has ribosomes lining the surface, and they tend to line up in long parallel reticulum. Here it is more haphazard and they are kind of irregular, look like more like vesicles than anything else. And you can see some mitochondria are also next to it. The next alteration is there in lysosomes. This is a fairly important part of pathology because large number of diseases are lysosomal storage diseases. So lysosomes are structures which normally contain hydrolytic enzymes. So acid phosphatase, sulfatase, glucuronidase, DNase, RNase, collagenase, all kinds of enzymes which can degrade just about every substance which are present in cell are present inside these. And there are two situations where there is alteration of lysosomes. The first is heterophagy or phagolysosome, phagocytosis. You have already studied what is phagocytosis. You will be doing more phagocyte function in the chapter on inflammation because neutrophils and macrophage function is detailed in that. More important than heterophagy and phagolysosome is degradation of endogenous substances. This happens in a process called autophagy. You have a lecture subsequent to this, I mean at 9 o'clock today, where we will be discussing these in detail. But essentially, there is formation of autophagic vacuoles in autophagy. Now, generally what happens is that the proteins, DNA, RNA, these are completely degraded, but membrane structures are typically not degraded that much. And these lipid substances sometimes end up in a polymerized substance called lipofuscin. Lipofuscin is the degraded, degraded membrane structures which are insoluble, they are unstainable, and they stand out as a light brown colored pigment. The other product which sometimes gets formed is myelin figures. Myelin figures are also degradative end result of these membrane degradation or structures similar to membrane, phospholipids and other structures. And they are because of formation of polymerized membranous structures which roll themselves up into onion skin like configurations. So these kind of structures, especially myelin figures, are a standard feature of lysosomal storage diseases. And you will be covering these in your chapter on genetics. But sometimes you can get iatrogenic lysosomal storage disease also. For example, chloroquine, which is right now very prominent because it is being used in COVID therapy, that raises the pH of the lysosome and therefore can cause a change in lysosomal function. Similar is amiodarone, which can stabilize phospholipids and produce changes of lysosomes in the heart. So autophagic vacuole looks like this. So if these are normal organelles, inside this phagosome, you got Fe, degraded organelles. So these are mitochondria which are in the process of being broken down into its individual components. And once these are digested, the constituents are released out into the cytoplasm where they can be reused by the other enzymes which are present in the cytoplasm. So this is a form of turnover of whatever is not required. Another structure you might get to see is a zebra body. Zebra bodies are seen when you have these kind of parallel arrangement. So unlike a myelin figure, it is in the form of zebra. It's like stripes, light and dark stripes, which can be seen in diseases like Fabry disease, alpha galactosidase, Hurler's disease, which is a kind of mucopolysaccharidosis, and sometimes even in Niemann-Pick and Tay-Sachs, which otherwise generally give rise to myelin figures like substances or foamy histiocytes with lipid in them. But sometimes you can get this. So Fabry disease and Hurler disease are the typical examples for zebra body. Similar to this, large number of other bodies are described, which you will come to in the individual organ system. And in Hurler's disease, you get this gargoylism. The facie starts to resemble gargoyles. Gargoyles are the water spouts of Notre Dame and other such churches of the Gothic era. And that's why the disease was originally called gargoylism. Of course, nowadays we would prefer not to use such terminology. Cytoskeleton can also alter. Cytoskeleton means these are the intermediate filaments which hold the cell together. They all have a diameter of approximately 15 nanometer. And based on which kind of cell it is, there is a different type of cytoskeleton. So you have epithelial cells having cytokeratin, muscle cells have desmin, neurons have neurofilament, glial cells have GFAP, mesenchymal cells of vimentin, and there are some others which have also been described. These can also form abnormal aggregations, and these are a byproduct of chronic cell injury. So examples are Mallory's hyaline and neurofibrillary tangles in Alzheimer's disease, which we'll cover in neurology. But just to give you an example, so this is Mallory hyaline. You can see that these are the liver cells, and inside these, even on light microscopy, you can see these aggregations of pink structureless proteinaceous material which stains darker than the rest of the normal cytoplasm. That's because these intermediate filaments are aggregated. It's also called alcoholic hyaline because alcohol produces these types of changes because of a chronic injury. So alcohol normally produces this, which is fatty change, but you can also get malacins, and microtubules are not that much altered in themselves. However, they are almost always a part of alterations produced in other kinds of cell injury. So you already saw, if you have an acute cell injury, microtubules and microfilaments are immediately damaged and lose their function because they require ATP to function. Certain drugs can affect actin microfilaments, which affect things like pseudopodia formation, engulfment. Some poisons also affect these. Microtubules are also depolymerized and repolymerized in injury, but sometimes you can get Cartagena syndrome or immotile cilia syndrome, which are because of inborn errors which are there in the structure of the cilia. Certain drugs like colchicine, vinca alkaloids in cancer chemotherapy, they affect microtubules because microtubules are what pull the chromosomes apart. The homologous chromosomes are pulled apart in mitosis because of the kinesin motors in the microtubule, which forms the mitotic spindle. And if these are affected, the cancer cell cannot divide. So these are an important aspect of your pharmacology. Alterations in mitochondria can be there, increased in number in hypertrophy, decreased in number in atrophy, and sometimes you get abnormal shaped mitochondria. You can get them in alcoholic and nutritional liver disease and mitochondrial myopathies. So this is an example of a mitochondrial myopathy in which you have parking lot inclusions. So various kinds of changes are described in different kinds of mitochondrial diseases. So coming to the adaptations themselves, we already saw that hyperplasia has increase in cell number, increasing the size of the tissue or organ, whereas hypertrophy is increase in cell size, increasing tissue or organ size. Atrophy is decrease in tissue or organ size due to decrease in cell size or number, and metaplasia is a reversible change of one type of mature tissue to another. So to understand these, we need to look at the different types of cells. So we have certain cells are labile. They are constantly dividing, like bone marrow cells, or in the crypts, we have a zone which has labile cells constantly dividing to produce more villi in the intestine. We have stable cells. Stable cells have the capacity to divide but are normally not dividing, like the liver cells. But when necessary, they can divide. Permanent cells, on the other hand, do not divide. So some things like muscle fibers and nerve fibers, they don't divide. They can, however, increase in size by increasing number of nuclei. So it's not that the nuclei do not increase, they can. So stem cells are another type of cells. Stem cells are a type of labile cells which generate differentiated cells but have the capacity of self-renewal. That means that they can divide. Some of the divided cells become differentiated, others renew the stem cells. So self-renewal is an important component of stem cells. A subtype of stem cells is called as reserve cells, and this is very important in pathology. Reserve cells are a type of stable cells. They don't normally divide, but they can function like stem cells when it is required. That means that they reside as a kind of reserve when there is damage. For example, if you have denudation of the surface epithelium, the reserve cells sense that they are needed, they divide, they reconstitute the epithelium, and then go back to being reserve cells. So they are a stem cells which renew themselves, but also generate differentiated cells, but only when it is required, whereas labile cells of marrow are constantly doing this. So physiological hyperplasia almost always is hormonal. That means there is increase in breast size. Hyperplasia means increase in number of cells. So more glands get generated in puberty in breast, in women, or in pregnancy and lactation. Sometimes even men can get this, especially in old age, because there is excess stimulation of the breast. Endometrium in progesterone phase is again, I mean, in it should say estrogenic phase actually, because estrogen causes stimulation of hyperplasia. Pathological hyperplasia is the result of excessive endocrine stimulation always. So you can get a hyperplasia of breast because the estrogen etc. are more. Endometrium because there is more estrogen. Prostate because testosterone is more. So you might have seen that in old people, prostate starts to enlarge, just like the hairs of the ear begin to grow, because although their testosterone levels fall, they become more sensitive to the dehydrotestosterone. There is a term which is used in pathology called adenomatous hyperplasia of a gland. Adenomatous hyperplasia means that the gland has increased in size because the number of cells in the gland has become more. So adenomatous means of the gland, hyperplasia means increase in number of cells. Typically, it is used in thyroid and other endocrine organs. You can also use adenomatous hyperplasia of epithelium, like for example, adenomatous or adenomas of the GI tract. You can get adenomatous hyperplasia prior to that or a precursor to that. So those are called as hyperplastic polyp. So if you have an endocrine gland and the number of glands become more, they just occupy more of the gland and the gland becomes bigger. That's fairly simple. So the glands are still of the normal shape. But if you have hyperplasia in an epithelium which has a basement membrane, they can't form a solid organ because there is a limiting basement membrane underneath it. So now if it is doing hyperplasia, what will happen? The basement membrane gets thrown into folds. That means there is a disproportionate increase in the size of the epithelium as compared to the lamina propria and the subepithelium. So if you have a skin, you get a polyp in the skin or a papilloma in the skin because it has become hyperplastic. These are called as hyperplastic polyp. So typical examples of hyperplasia include uterine smooth muscle. In pregnancy and parturition, there is both hyperplasia and hypertrophy occurring together. So smooth muscle cells become bigger and increased in number. It also involutes after delivery, both by apoptosis and by decrease in cell size. Then you have a concept called compensatory hyperplasia, where there is regeneration. It means if you have part of the liver removed, it will regenerate. part of the skin removed, it will regenerate. Other examples of pathological hyperplasia are hypertrophic scars and keloids, which occur during wound healing, epidermal proliferation in papilloma virus infection, and as I said before, hyperplasia is often a predisposing condition to neoplasia, whether it is of the epithelium, in solid organs, and endocrine glands. You will study this later in your chapter on neoplasia. So this is a thyroid gland which has become hyperplastic, big and forming nodules like this, bulging out. And if you take a section, you find that these are the relatively normal sized follicles, but here the number of follicular epithelial cells has become more. This is because of increased TSH stimulation causing cell division to form more cells. This is a prostate. So this is a big prostate. So it's a hyperplasia or benign hyperplasia of the prostate. Sometimes you use the term hypertrophy in surgery because it's become bigger. But the correct pathological term is hyperplasia. It is also called glandulostromal hyperplasia because both the glandular component and the stromal component of the prostate increase in size and it forms nodules like this. And in this, you get increased number of glands. So the glands become more in number. Sometimes the architecture also changes and they become architecturally more complex rather than the simpler glands which are there in prostate normally without hyperplasia. It is almost an inevitable feature of aging. In the uterus, if there is hyperplasia, the endometrial lining becomes thicker. So the thickness is normally less than 5 millimeter, and now it will become much more than that, maybe 10 millimeters. You can even pick it up on ultrasound, you can measure it. And if you look at the section, if this is normal proliferative endometrium, here the number of glands has become more, and some of them have become bigger and cystically dilated. Some people in the old days used to call it cystic hyperplasia and all. However, now it is called as either simple hyperplasia or complex hyperplasia. So some terminologies have become redundant. In complex hyperplasia, the architecture is also changed. So you will have a class on this later. Complex hyperplasia is seen when the glands become more back to back and they have more racemose features. That means that the outline starts resembling a secretory endometrium rather than a proliferative endometrium, where the glands typically have round configuration. Coming to regeneration, it happens because, as I said, reserve cells undergo a hyperplasia and they reconstitute the lost volume. So this illustrates an old legend from Greek times where a person called Prometheus was tortured by having an eagle eat his liver every day. So the eagle will come, it will eat its liver, and then in the night the entire liver will grow back because he's immortal. But it also illustrates the regenerative capacity of the liver, which means that you can remove even half the liver and the rest of the liver can regenerate. Cannot regenerate its shape, but it can regenerate number of cells and recover its function. So ultimately Hercules comes and kills the eagle to free this poor guy. Reconstitution or regeneration of lost structure requires that some amount of tissue architecture be present. So if the reticulin framework of the liver is still retained, let's give an example. Suppose you have an acute acute hepatitis with submassive necrosis of the liver. The cells die, but these reticulin fibers, which are in between forming the structure of the liver, the normal liver cells are supposed to line the sides of this reticulin framework. If they are left behind, then the liver will grow back and retain its architecture. On the other hand, if this reticulin framework is destroyed, so when you come to a liver chapter, you will read about cirrhosis, regenerative nodules become nodules. So they do not regain the normal architecture. And this kind of disorganized kind of architecture can be harmful. This is an example of a myotube. So these are the cross striations of a muscle fiber. There is one normal nucleus here, one normal nucleus here, and this is a reserve satellite cell. These are reserve cells which normally remain quiescent, but if you have necrosis of a myofiber in cell culture, you can see how these satellite cells which are left behind, they proliferate and they can reconstitute the myofiber and relay the proteins which form the myotube. Valerian degeneration, you must have studied in your physiology. If you cut a nerve, whatever is distal undergoes degeneration, but it regenerates also. So the axon regrows. As long as the cell body is still remaining, the axons will regrow and try to re-establish contact with the distal end. Sometimes if we have amputation, what happens is that there is no distal end because distal end has been removed, in which case you can get something known as a neuroma, amputation neuroma. That means that the Schwann cells and the nerve fiber. So whenever the axon grows, the Schwann cells also proliferate along with it to reconstitute the nerve fiber, but they all grow to form just a nodule like this. Sometimes you can even feel a phantom limb which does not exist. Coming to hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is an increase in cell size by gain of cellular substance, and the whole organ can become hypertrophic. So either it is because of increased functional requirement like exercising a muscle, or endocrine stimulation can also cause, like in pregnancy. There is, however, a limit to hypertrophy. So whether it is the heart or whether it is a muscle in which you have injected steroids, there is a limit beyond which it cannot hypertrophy, and then degenerative changes can start. That's why steroids are harmful. Of course, they also cause rage and other degradative processes and liver injury. But even the muscle itself starts to degrade beyond a point, and there can be rhabdomyolysis also and organ failure. Muscles typically respond to mechanical trigger when you exercise or trophic trigger when you have increase in testosterone or other such hormones. You also get pathological hypertrophy in disease of the heart, which is an important part of your pathology. Here is an example. This is the right ventricle, which is relatively normal, and this left ventricle has undergone a process called concentric hypertrophy. The chamber is not dilated. That's because there is hypertension. So it's a response to hypertension, trying to maintain the same pressure, which is high, has made the heart muscle grow thicker. This kind of hypertrophy is called concentric hypertrophy, seen in essential hypertension. This on the left is the normal muscle. It has small nuclei, central in cardiac muscle. These are the intercalated discs. Whereas when you have hypertrophy, the nuclei become bigger because the nuclei, now a cardiac muscle has only one nucleus. A myotube is a multinucleated cell in the skeletal muscle. So to maintain a larger muscle, the heart nucleus also becomes larger by endoduplication. There is a hypertrophy with splitting of the Z band so that more of the muscle can form. And hypertrophic muscle has big nuclei like this. So the nucleus has become bigger. The myofiber size also has become bigger than normal. Here also you can see. Atrophy, on the other hand, is a decrease in cell size. It can be due to various reasons. You can have disuse, denervation, ischemia to an organ, inadequate nutrition and starvation. You become weak when you starve yourself. Loss of hormone stimulation, could be old age, could be due to other reasons like castration. You have senile atrophy. Senile atrophy, not just because of hormones, but because of other age related changes. And you can have pressure atrophy. For example, if your limb is put in a cast. So atrophy can be physiological, like developmental, which is typically, as we saw, using apoptosis, or it could be pathologic. That means that there is either a decreased workload, loss of innervation, blood supply. Marasmus is an example. So marasmus, you lose muscle mass. The plasma protein levels are maintained by breaking down your muscles. So that is a kind of atrophy of muscles. So this is what happens. You can have hypertrophy of heart in certain diseases, and heart can become this big, or in certain diseases like cancer, cachexia, the heart can decrease in size and become this small, and it could be this kind of drastic difference in size. Skeletal muscle, if this is normal, this is atrophic. So notice that in the same space where this much muscle was present, now 3 bundles have come in the same area, and some amount of fat has also increased between them. This is because the muscles have atrophied. You see more nucleus, less cytoplasm. So if this was hypertrophy, nucleus were bigger, this is atrophy of heart. In heart atrophy, you get smaller myofibers with small nuclei like this. And the space between the fibers become more. And sometimes you can have a fatty infiltration also. So fat can ingrow from the epicardium in between the muscle fibers. Brain can undergo atrophy in Alzheimer's disease. It can lose volume and the gyri become kind of standing alone like this with widening of the sulcus. You can have atrophy of testes also. For example, if this is normal testis, this was undescended. Now, undescended testis normally doesn't grow rather than because the pressure prevents it from going. So it is also called as hypoplastic rather than atrophy. But sometimes you can have atrophy of testis due to other causes also. You can have atrophy of kidney. So if this is the normal kidney, if the artery of the kidney is narrowed with atherosclerosis, it can become shrunken like this, typically due to apoptosis. So if this was normal in a rat kidney, if you tied off the artery or you reduce the flow, slowly the kidney has lost volume and the pelvis is dilated until nothing much is left at all. That's by a process of apoptosis. You can look at this is a normal and atrophic pancreas. So this is normal pancreas, this is the endocrine cells and this is the exocrine part. Now suppose there is a stone in the exocrine part which causes increase in backflow and pressure. The endocrine cells are normal, but the glands have atrophic and become fibrotic. Similar changes can be produced because of chronic inflammation of pancreas called chronic pancreatitis. Coming to an important process, this is metaplasia. Metaplasia is a reversible change. It's important to note the word reversible change in which one adult cell type is replaced by another adult cell type. That means it is not a developmental change. Metaplasia occurring in development happens but is considered normal. That's how it is forming. For example, the cervix undergoes intrauterine change from columnar to squamous. But after puberty, there is ectropion, and then the exposed part of endocervix undergoes a process called metaplasia. So one is embryonic, which is normal development, and one is metaplasia. So this is a cellular adaptation in which indigenous cells, which are native to the organ, are replaced by cells that are better suited to tolerate a specific abnormal environment. Okay. So because of metaplasia, the normal protective mechanism which is native to the cell might be lost. Let's give an example. Suppose you smoke. Smoke is an irritation of the lining of the bronchioles. Normally, the bronchioles are lined by ciliated columnar epithelium. It has a protective mechanism for removing whatever particulate matter gets deposited in them by the ciliary action. Smoking causes a presence of a, yeah, some people are raising their hand. I will come to questions after I finish this. So what happens in metaplasia is that smoking produces an irritation. This irritation requires this epithelium to change to tolerate it because the columnar cells cannot tolerate it. It changes in type to squamous cells. The squamous cells are able to tolerate the irritation better, but they are not able to get rid of the particulate matter, so they lost their function. And so the normal protective mechanism gets lost. And sometimes persistence of the signal that result in metaplasia leads. So squamous metaplasia is a very typical example. Squamous metaplasia always happens when there is irritation or chronic injury, for example, stones in a duct or smoking or eversion of cervix, which I've discussed. Sometimes in vitamin A deficiency, there is squamous metaplasia. So proper maintenance of epithelial function requires vitamin A. If it is not there, you get a metaplastic change. And you already discussed about laws of specialized function. Sometimes the reverse happens. There is squamous to columnar change. That, for example, it is in Barrett's esophagus. Normally, the esophagus is lined by squamous epithelium so that it can tolerate the food particles better, whereas the stomach has acid and therefore it has a columnar cells with protective mucus barrier to protect against acid. If you have reflux esophagitis or reflux of the stomach contents into the esophagus, to tolerate the acid, the Barrett's esophagus is a metaplastic change. It changes into columnar cells because of the inductive effects of the gastric acid, and therefore it is able to tolerate this better. But on the other hand, Barrett's esophagus can give rise to neoplastic adenocarcinoma. Normal tumors of the esophagus are squamous cell carcinoma, but in the lower end, you get adenocarcinomas. Sometimes you can have mesenchymal metaplasia. That means one type of mesenchymal cell changes into another. You can get aberrant cartilage, bone, adipose tissue, etc. So myositis ossificans is a situation where if you have injury to the insertion area of a muscle, that area of muscle can undergo a calcification, which is called myositis ossification. Bone also can form there. This is what happens. So you have the reserve cells. Normally, reserve cells are programmed to produce the type of epithelium for which it is in reserve. But if you have change of the commitment process or change of this of the commitment of the reserve cell, instead of producing this kind of a columnar cell, it starts producing a squamous cell instead, and vice versa. And so ultimately the columnar cell is shed and lost, and the whole thing becomes metaplastic squamous epithelium instead of the columnar epithelium, which is supposed to be there. So here this is lung bronchial lining completely replaced by squamous epithelium here. And this is Barrett's esophagus. Normal esophageal lining here is abruptly changed to, now this is a columnar cell change true, but it is intestinal type instead of producing the gastric type, because the reprogramming of the stem cells is not that proper. Instead of getting gastric epithelium, which can sometimes be produced, you might end up with an intestinal type of epithelium also, which is neither useful here nor useful there. So if this is the squamous epithelium, which tends to be very white and shining, this is gastric epithelium, which is red and translucent or transparent. This kind of epithelium, which is supposed to end here, is now extending up in tongues like this. So this is called Barrett's esophagus. It's a columnar metaplasia. Another type of intracellular change is intracellular accumulations. You already saw how water can accumulate. Sometimes proteins can accumulate because of folding error. You can get alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, in which case abnormal alpha-1 antitrypsin can aggregate to form hyaline globules. We already saw Mallory's hyaline. Russell body is nothing but immunoglobulins which aggregate inside the body of a plasma cell to form a round pink body. Sometimes in glycogen storage disease, you can get accumulation of glycogen, which can happen in the heart, in the skeletal muscle, or in the liver, depending on which enzyme is lost. And they have special stains like Best carmine or PAS with diastase to look for these. Sometimes pigments can also accumulate inside the cell. We already saw how hydropic change can produce dysfunction of the cell. It can block the sinusoids, and therefore India ink, which is there in the hepatic artery, does not go to the central vein but remains in the sinusoids. Fatty change can also happen in the liver. It can also happen in muscle, heart, and kidney. Now normally triglycerides accumulate in fatty change, which is because increased fatty acid delivery to liver, which can happen in starvation, in liver injuries in which the fat metabolism is affected, so apoproteins cannot be synthesized and therefore lipid export is affected, or in anoxic conditions there might be decreased utilization and therefore it accumulates inside the muscle, or it could be the liver also. In the liver, typically it starts inside the endoplasmic reticulum and is initially membrane bound and is called a liposome. Another kind of fatty accumulation is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a breakdown product, like you saw in jitter cells. Whenever you have fatty acids getting released, they are triglycerides getting released, phospholipids getting released. They are eaten by the histiocytes and which become foam cells. So this is the free fatty acids getting exported as lipoproteins. Anything which affects this will cause fatty change of the liver. A fatty change in liver causes a large yellow greasy liver, which shows presence of large fat vacuoles inside the cytoplasm. You can see how the fat vacuoles look. They are very big, like this. Similarly, you can have it in other conditions, but depending on the kind of condition which is inducing, it can be of two types. It can be microvesicular, which is small tiny droplets which are inside the cytoplasm, typically seen when there is an acute fatty change, when it is early. Or it can be macrovesicular fatty change, which is what you get in alcoholic liver. So alcoholic liver starts as microvesicular, they coalesce together to form large vesicles, so it is macrovesicular. And they can affect the sinusoidal transport. If this is normal, these fat globules can change the sinusoidal configuration. Other examples are in kwashiorkor, or type of malnutrition where there is no lipoprotein in the liver and therefore fatty change occurs, and it can be quite alarming. So there is so little protein being generated by the liver that this much of fatty change has happened. In pregnancy also you can get lipemia and you can get these microvesicular fatty change like this sometimes. Myocardium can also show fatty change. So whenever there is chronic injury or even acute injury, you have done a fat stain here, oil red O. So the normal muscle is like this, and wherever fat droplets are there, it has changed positive. It's a black and white. So it is red in color if you do an oil red O. And on EM also you can see the fat droplets here. The foam cells which are inside the macrophages typically can have cholesterol, foamy histiocytes, jitter cells in CNS infarcts, which we saw, foamy histiocytes in traumatic fat necrosis. You can get it in atherosclerosis. You can get it in hyperlipidemia conditions like xanthomas. You can get it in the gallbladder because gallbladder normally contains a lot of cholesterol, and you can have cholesterolosis of its surface. So if you look at this, this is atherosclerosis in which foamy lipid-laden histiocytes are there inside the plaques. So in atherosclerosis, the intima of the artery is thickened by atherosclerotic plaques, which contain these foamy histiocytes or foamy macrophages, which are containing the cholesterol. Another type of giant cell is two-tone giant cell. So cholesterol typically forms a cleft. So this part of it is cleft, but if you look here, you can see that there is foaminess in the cytoplasm. And this giant cell central part is eosinophilic. There's a wreath of nuclei around it, and the peripheral parts are having foamy cytoplasm. This foamy cytoplasm is a feature seen in many xanthomas, xanthogranulomas, some tumors which are related to xanthogranuloma. In all of these, you can get these two-tone giant cells. Sometimes you can get pigments. So, which could be exogenous or endogenous. Exogenous, it could be virtually anything. Carbon in the lungs and tattoos are good examples. Endogenous pigments, hemosiderin is because of iron breakdown. Melanin is because of, say, a melanin nevus or a melanoma, which is producing melanin. We already discussed this lipofuscin. It's a breakdown product of lipid metabolism, which can color the heart or other organs. Sometimes bilirubin or biliverdin can be deposited. So this is hemosiderosis of lung. So here is the lung alveoli, nothing inside this, whereas inside this alveolus it is full of hemosiderin-laden macrophages. This could be because of a chronic venous congestion, because the black flow, because of pressure from the left heart makes the lung congested, and so RBCs break down, and subsequently the hemosiderin is taken up by the macrophages, which is called brown induration of lung, Or you can get pulmonary hemosiderosis, which is what this is an example of. And if you do an iron stain, it has this Prussian blue color. So this is also called as pearl stain. You can have hemosiderosis of liver because of hepcidin and other iron containing compounds having problem, or in iron overload also, for example chronic transfusions. And if you do a Pearl's reaction, Prussian blue color is seen inside the liver cells like this. Lipofuscin looks similar. It's a golden brown kind of a pigment sometimes, but unlike hemosiderin, it will not stain. And it's a wear and tear pigment. It's a sign of chronic apoptosis going on, which is getting deposited because, as you know, the condensed products of apoptosis can sometimes not be degraded by the macrophages, or they are taken up by neighboring cells also and can remain there as lipofuscin pigment, and therefore it is also called a wear and tear pigment. It's a sign of chronic injury. It's a sign of autophagic vacuoles being present, and you can see these pigments. So this is in the heart. So heart is having lots of lipofuscin pigment because of chronic injury. So we are coming towards the end of subcellular alterations. So one aspect which you need to learn is cellular aging. Now, aging could be because of changes in the brain, hypothalamus, hormone secretion. All of these do get affected, and they also cause aging. But one of the very important aspects which cannot be so easily reversed is cellular aging. So cellular aging means there is a decline of cell function. This could be in a cell culture also. So cells which are being grown in culture can also age, or it could be inside the organism, and it's a big topic because the aging related changes cause a lot of morbidity and mortality. There are aging related genes which have been studied, which you can Google for it. There are a lot of them. By and large, we can divide the cellular aging processes into a few important categories. First is replicative senescence. Replicative senescence means that a cell has a limited ability to divide. Cells in cell culture divide a certain number of times and then they stop dividing. Even if you deliver the growth factors required, it will not divide unless you have immortalized it, which is becoming like a malignancy. One of the reasons for that is telomere attrition. As the telomeres shorten, they lose the ability to divide, and that is because of the expression or lack of expression of telomerase. Young cells express telomerase, which reconstitutes the telomeres which cannot be replicated during DNA replication, and so they need to be specially added to the end by the telomerase. But the telomerase expression comes down as the cell becomes old. In carcinomas, what happens is this telomerase becomes constitutively expressed. So therefore, it becomes a marker of malignant transformation. The cells can keep on dividing. Telomerase is also affected in other functions. Could be abnormal telomerase in pulmonary fibrosis, aplastic anemia. They are also seen. Another thing which is there which affects replication is the P16-INK4A, also called a CDKN2A. Now this P16 protects against uncontrolled mitosis. The presence of P16 prevents the mitosis or it blocks. In some tumors, P16 becomes overexpressed, which kind of bypasses this control over the mitosis. On the other hand, certain carcinomas can be having viral products like in HPV, which have viral proteins which mimic the P16, and therefore they bypass the effect. So P16 is normally P16 is lost in a carcinoma. So if there's no P16, the tumor progresses. It's a tumor suppressor gene. But in carcinoma cervix, P16 is overexpressed. HPV related cancers of the upper aerodigestive tract, P16 is overexpressed. Then you can have DNA damage and epigenetic changes accumulate. So the DNA damage related, we understand little bit. Epigenetic changes in aging are a topic of active research right now. We are trying to understand how these epigenetic changes contribute to aging. In certain cancer syndromes and in certain aging related syndromes, you can have deficiency of DNA repair genes. So Wermer syndrome, you get early senescence. Even a child can start looking old because there is a defective DNA helicase involved. In other syndromes like Bloom syndrome or ataxia telangiectasia, which predispose to cancer also, you also have increased aging because they cannot repair the DNA damage. Sometimes oxidative damage can accumulate, and oxidative damage related changes are also a great topic for research, and antioxidants are being tried to control the aging. Coming to the last few slides, we can have misfolding of protein also in aging. So protein homeostasis is affected when there is misfolding. It could be because there is a deficiency of chaperones or heat shock proteins which prevent misfolding by binding to them. It could be because of autophagy related events. That means that there is oxidative damage, there is more of oxidative damage and less of autophagy. Autophagy recycles the damaged organelles. So if we have higher oxidative damage to the organelles but reduced autophagy, then that cell undergoes senescence. And rapamycin is an antibiotic which protects by increasing the autophagy in the tissue or cell culture actually. Another thing which can happen in aging is dysregulation of nutrient sensing. For example, if you reduce your caloric intake drastically, it protects you from aging. The less you eat, the less you age. The more you eat, the more you age. So eating doesn't just cause you obesity, it also makes you old. One of the effects is because of IGF. So down regulation of IGF protects by lowering the metabolism. So IGF-1 is the end product of growth hormone stimulation. If you have excessive growth hormone stimulation, that causes aging, and down regulation of IGF protects against aging. Another set of substances is called sirtuins. Sirtuins are NAD dependent deacetylases which protect by reduction of the cellular metabolism. They reduce the cellular apoptosis, they improve protein folding and have antioxidant activity. And therefore, these are the object of a lot of research in the last 10 years, how to prevent aging. So thank you very much. We have come to the end of